For a long time, there has been this AI is becoming super powerful somewhere on the horizon. And for many decades now, we have always been saying, yes, it's on the horizon, but it may take for however long. I think this has changed. My perception is that we're moving very fast, that we are really close to coming to a stage where it is insanely powerful. And if you would give O3 to somebody from 3 years ago, they would say, oh, this is AGI.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Chris Rod Mac Show, where every week we discuss the latest news, trends, as well as discuss with our highly regarded guests about the different dynamics within the AI space. And I'm really, really happy that I'm not only joined by Rod and Max today, but also by Thorsten Kranz, who is currently the head of AI solutions at the DHL Group, but has many, many other experiences in the past within the space. We're very happy to have you here, Thorsten, today.
Hi, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to the discussion.
Great. Before we dive into very interesting topics for today, do you also want to just give a quick introduction about yourself, maybe highlighting some of the things you have done in the past?
Yes. So at DHL now, I'm basically a manager all around AI. Especially in the last 2 or 3 years, it has become quite intense, I must say, definitely. I mean, everybody who even distantly follows this topic might assume that it has become more than it was before that. But I have been in this field already for a long time. Starting long ago, I studied physics. Then I went into the neuroscience research field where I tried to apply artificial intelligence to understand the natural intelligence. This was maybe around 2007 or something. Later on, then I moved into a consultancy where I first started really hands-on as a data scientist, really analyzing data, applying machine learning to business problems across different industries. And back then it just exploded, right? It quickly grew. I was the first data scientist in that consultancy. Then I built up a team. After 2 years, it was 20 people, then a whole department of 50 people. And then I decided to move to a company that does not consulting, but to be part of a journey of a company for a longer time. And now I'm at DHL and very happy in doing so. At my heart, I'm maybe still the technical guy who loves to code, who loves to crunch data somehow. But I happen to become now a manager, which I also do with a lot of passion.
That's really, really great to hear. And honestly speaking, maybe you are really one of those trend scout, the first data scientist in your company. That sounds very much so. And also sounds super interesting when I hear about your neuroscience type of study. So for today, we wanted to dive into 3 topics. The first being a little bit your experience and maybe also your perspective on AI within the enterprise space. And we have also some news snippets from recent days that we would like to discuss with you. I think the second block of questions we would have is around career jobs now in the advent of AI. And honestly speaking, I don't think any of the jobs are safe and they will all evolve. And we would like your perspective on that. And then last but not least, obviously, as someone who's been in the space for such a long time and being a dedicated coder at heart, we would also be very curious to hear about how you implement AI in your day and how you use to be more efficient, maybe even as a manager. So with that, let's dive into the topics. And I want to start with a report by Lenovo. And actually, the report talks about the effectiveness or the return on investment of AI. And as we know, a lot of AI CapEx investments have been done not only by the big technology companies, but also by a lot of other industry players. And a bit of statistics maybe to start us off. So 26% of adopters say that AI projects have been implemented by their organizations and that they have surpassed expectations. And maybe around 70% said that expectations have been met. But also we see that a lot of people have actually not really been adopting any AI solutions. 25% have run pilots, and most of them seem to be still in the early stages. I think also maybe something to mention is that one of the major obstacles, it seems, to adopt AI is a low level of organizational readiness in terms of data, processes, and IT infrastructure. Thorsten, what are your first reaction to that? Do you see that as well, or do you have other experiences?
I mean, this is not surprising at all to me. I think we have been facing, since the release of ChatGPT, many unrealistic expectations. Some companies just then started working on this topic. Others maybe even discarded their due homework that they had to do on data consistency, on proper management, on setting up also an organization that is able to support it with people that not just look at the technicalities of data, but also at the content and the semantics of data. And if you don't do your homework properly, you will not be able to gain benefits from it. We at DHL, but also other companies, have been working in this field already a long time before the release of ChatGPT. You have to prepare your organization. You have to prepare your IT infrastructure. For example, building up capabilities in the area of ML ops, meaning that you can easily transfer a POC that you have been doing into a production scenario, including all the monitoring, logging, also organizational setup of support infrastructure for this. If you haven't done this before, you still have this homework. And if you don't do your homework, then you will not be able to gain any ROI out of it. Some things have not changed, even with the advent of large language models and all this stuff. You still have to be able to adopt it. You still have to be able to integrate it into your processes. And you also still have to take the people with you. People have to understand what it's about. The people will have to cooperate or use the tools that you give to them. If you just start it now, you still have a way to go.
That makes a lot of sense. So you're saying that and in any case, you need to have the foundations right. And one part of it is obviously data quality and having the right data to actually run your models on. And I actually remember this meme where I guess everyone thinks ChatGPT is magic and you just like ask a question and you get magic back. But honestly speaking, if you have shit data, it will give you a very shit answer in the end of it. What makes it so difficult to have good data in organizations? Why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to get the foundations right?
I think there's not the one answer to it. I think also the organizations are massively different. If you look at a e-commerce company that just has one business model, then maybe you just have a low number of actual data sets that are really relevant. You have the usage of your website, you have maybe some stock information that you have to manage somehow. These are maybe the core information, and then it's rather easy to build everything around it. If you look at a historically grown company where we have so many in Europe, across Europe also, and also in other regions, of course, then it's massively different. Then you have maybe thousands of legacy systems. Then you have maybe a whole variety of data sets that could be relevant. In this case, definitely, it's just a tedious work. You have to start with a clear mindset in prioritization. You have to make sure that you first focus on the data that are most valuable, that are most promising to give you an ROI in the end. And then also you have to really start holistically, in the sense that, in my experience, any initiative that just says, let's improve our data quality, let's improve our data governance, this always fails. This will never work out. Data quality comes from the usage of data. Only if you, in the end, if you notice that cheap data bites you, then you will improve something earlier. So you have to iteratively go in cycles, in my opinion, like a spiral going up, hopefully not down, like get some data quality, bring them into use, notice what's not working, go back to the data, improve it, and also change the processes that lead to the data in the first place. Only then you will achieve data quality, and not as a long planned program, but iteratively in cycles.
And here I'm wondering, Thorsten, on data quality. You were mentioning here about more established organizations, legacy organizations, and so on. And here you can have, so data has been stored throughout many systems, maybe some of them whose maybe interfaces, software, code is no longer up to date. It's maybe like legacy, it's maybe outdated. So with this wave of bringing AI to the end user, and then, for example, letting users chat with their data sources, connect all type of very diverse data sources and so on, how do organizations are able to bring all these disparage of systems and information and then make them available for users? Is that being something that, because you were very prepared over multiple decades, maybe like a swift process, or has it been a challenge for you to make this possible?
It is a challenge. I wouldn't talk in the past. It has been a challenge. It is still a challenge. And we are in the middle of this journey. And we also again and again have to rethink the approach of doing so. I mean, already many years ago, the whole world of reporting evolved. Suddenly you created dashboards for everything. It feels now that mostly people need a dashboard to navigate through the dashboards that they are having. And so the promised holy land of data availability turns out to be quite a maze where you don't find yourself or don't quickly come to the answers that you're searching for. And whenever the dashboards that you have are not able to give you the answer that you're searching for, you create another dashboard, and this increases complexity again. What we are seeing now as a trend really is this change towards interactive data analysis, also for the non-tech savvy people. I mean, also earlier this has been a thing, but especially now with the combination of large language models, maybe a chat style approach, not necessarily, but maybe yes, maybe some agentic technology, and then giving live access to the respective databases that are relevant. We see a change on how you can interact with your data. Of course, this just also takes time to explore it, to move forward, but being able to spontaneously answer a question, I don't know, how many of our employees work in this or that area, or what is our male-female ratio in a certain management level. Answering stuff like that, yes, of course, you can create yet another dashboard, but having spontaneous access to these kinds of data insights is something that is finding its way into organizations, also in our organization, and which is becoming more and more important.
And I want to follow up on that. So like you were now describing so some organizations have so many dashboards, and not only that, but also this idea of interactively communicating with data. Something that I notice with some users of software such as ChatGPT is that they struggle just formulating their thoughts on a text prompt. This idea that we in the end have these open systems, we can ask anything, it becomes daunting. So is there anything that you're doing in this direction to facilitate users, maybe either to formulate their thoughts, or maybe either to present other interfaces that are not like chat-based, such that they can interact with this data, but not have the challenge that they might not know what they want to know?
Yes, I mean, you always have to tackle it on from multiple directions, in my opinion. One aspect which we have been investing in already for a long time is training and enablement. Already before the time of ChatGPT, we have rolled out large trainings, back then more under the title of data science, where we have a management training, full day training, where already thousands of our managers have gone through. We have an e-learning where tens of thousands of our employees have gone through, just to bring them closer to the core concepts, also bringing them to the idea that data is relevant and data quality matters, and everybody has to contribute to data quality. Now in the age of ChatGPT and the new tools that are available there, we also establish training formats for that. Of course, a lot of awareness sessions and everything, but beyond that, also dedicated trainings to understand more of the concepts behind it, to understand what a large language model is able to do and what it is not able to do, but what maybe some other tools might be helpful with. And then also learning the craft, I wouldn't call it art, maybe just the craft of prompting is definitely something that we also try to bring to our employees. And also here we have already reached quite a large number of people on this, but this is still a journey. I mean, also one has to be aware that things are also changing over time. When you were prompting GPT 3.5, you had to look at a lot of rules. You had to be very careful in how to do the prompt. If you now look at those more reasoning models like O3 Mini, O1, maybe also DeepSeek R1, if you apply those prompting techniques, it feels a little bit like you're pushing forward a car that's working, right? Because they already learned a lot of these things, and they usually understand very well what you want. My personal perception even is that they sometimes understand better what I want than I actually do, because this is really helpful. Also, when we come later to how I use it, then this is really something that strikes me with the recent models. But nevertheless, I think bringing closer to the organization how to use it, but also for what to use it and for what not. I think this is super relevant. And here, the most important thing for me is really to understand what these things are made for and what they are not made for. They are not made to do calculations. They are not made to create random numbers. They are not made to know everything. They know surprisingly much, that's true, but you should not use them like Wikipedia. This is not what they are made for. But if you give them the source of a Wikipedia information, they can distill the information for you quite impressively.
Thorsten, what I'm getting away from what you just said is just because there's Gen AI now doesn't mean that the underlying way of getting to use these type of technologies changed, and a lot of homework, as you call it, or foundational work needs to be done, which is true for not only Gen AI, but also a lot of other cloud applications, right? So you talked about data quality, making everyone in an organization accountable to that type of data quality and consistency. I think you also, when you talked about prompting and the accuracy maybe of prompting, it really reminded me of how we started out with search, or Google search, if you want, where first it was just a keyword that you would key in and you would hope and pray for like an answer. And nowadays you can like even type whole sentences and obviously Google would understand what you're looking for. And it is a little bit scary, as you say, with newer technologies and models that maybe even the models know better what we actually try to express them, how we expressed it. So maybe coming back to our topic today, which is sort of this whole area and discussion around return on investment. In your experience, which business functions or processes have you seen had the highest or has the highest potential for AI-driven return? And why do you think these are very successful?
I mean, one area that has been mentioned quite often, which quite obviously will benefit from it, is the whole customer service area. Everything that is about verbal communication, both in audio form and also written form. I mean, this is the core expertise of these kinds of models. Also, if you see what the voice mode, the advanced voice mode of ChatGPT, but also of Gemini and other tools look like, this feels so natural, and you can really forget that this is a machine you are talking to there. Whereas I think most organizations are still very far away from leveraging this technology sufficiently. But I think this is quite clear that here a bigger fraction of the manual work that has to go into it will be possibly done by a machine in the near future. It could be done now if organizations would be fast enough to adopt it. The question, of course, also here is then again about commercial models. Like some vendors here also have hour rates for these kinds of machines, which are maybe below European working hour rates, but above maybe some offshore rates, which you might get in other countries. So this is also another important consideration. How do you make sure that the gains that you get from AI remain with you, and you don't go into a dependency with the vendor that then will take bigger parts of the ROI that you might be having from it? Beyond customer service, I think everything that is scalable task, that is maybe a repetitive task, that is clear how a task has to be solved, and where there is a large number of those tasks recurring, and ideally somehow text-based. All these kinds of things will have a big impact there, definitely. Of course, which I didn't mention here now. I mean, first of all, the task has to be digital. I mean, many companies are still struggling in that, yet you have a full end-to-end digital pipeline, that you have an end-to-end digital documentation of what has been happening in the past also. Only then you can also make the machine understand and learn from the examples of the past, and then it is quite straightforward to automate bigger parts of this also. And I think all these kinds of repetitive tasks at scale digital, ideally text-based, they will all be possibly automated quite quickly, but also beyond that, definitely a lot of things.
So customer support, but then also repetitive processes that are maybe also slightly, let's say, deterministic or come often, might be something that gets disrupted by AI. I suppose maybe coming back to the homework that we discussed before, it seems like digitization in general is like one of those foundational things. Like if you are still offline, or industries that tend to be more offline, obviously you still need to like jump that loop, whilst obviously tech companies that are already digital born will have an easier task to like adopt to these AI technologies. Maybe moving on a little bit. So, I mean, also there was an article in the Financial Times about AI investment. And of course, when we think about return on investment, we need to ask what's the investment. And the 4 leading US tech companies, I mean, Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon, and Meta, they are spending lots of money into AI. I think 63% of spending has been put and poured into AI. I think there was another article that is maybe more on the industry benchmark. And I think even there, nearly 20% of tech budget in 2025 will be spent on Gen AI use cases. Exactly what do people spend it on when it comes to these when it comes to tech budgets? And do you think people should be spending it somewhere else? What is 20% going to be enough? What is your take on this?
I mean, the short answer is just looking at the cap that Max is wearing, GPUs. I think this is the biggest investment at the moment, I guess, right? You also did not mention, for example, XAI, where we have some clear numbers. They already have, like, I think 100K H100 GPUs. You can look up the price of such a GPU and just multiply it, right? And they now are even rumored to have 200K in the near future. These are enormous investments, which go in the order of magnitude, like valuations of some of the biggest companies we have in Germany, for example. This order of magnitude we are talking about just for the GPU investments. So it's a lot of tech investment at the moment. That's also the reason why NVIDIA, the share price, had such an insane development at the moment. So the technology there is really at the moment where the money is spent on. But of course, then also talent is a super important ingredient. We have been talking about the shortage of transistors, so GPUs basically. The next hurdle is then probably electricity. So you also see now already those companies investing into nuclear plants, for example. So they will have dedicated nuclear plants just for the AI computation centers. And this is just insane. And yeah, beyond that, of course, all this work that goes into it, the talent that you have to pay for it. Some of the most talented people get insane salaries if you try to hire them. There's also kind of a talent war between those companies. If you just jump 2 or 3 times between those big tech companies as a real expert, you can come to insane salaries over time. And so a lot of investments go there. I myself must say, I do not know where exactly it is going. Of course, they have big hopes for the return on invest. They also have big fear of missing out if they don't invest into it. But on the other hand side, you see the open source developments. You see that many of those foundational models are now available for free. We have DeepSeek R1, which is a really state-of-the-art model in terms of large reasoning models. It was released open source for free to everybody, which you might also consider maybe as a geopolitical move or something. I don't know. I cannot fully judge on it, but definitely it has big impact on it. So the most money goes into training foundational models. Foundational models tend to be low cost in terms of using them, or also maybe even for free. So the value creation probably in the near future more comes on the application layer. So on the layer where you then apply these things to a domain, where you apply large language models to IT ticket resolution, for example. There goes so much effort into IT ticket resolution across the world. If you build an application, as ServiceNow, for example, is trying to do it, as everybody is trying to do it at the moment, this will create value for companies like us, for example, and for every other company that really has this pain And then we come back to what I said a few minutes earlier. The question will be, how much of the savings that we can have stays with us, and how much will go to these kinds of vendors building the applications, and how much of this goes to the ones building the foundational models below it. This is totally undecided for me. Nobody knows where it's going. Everybody knows there will be billions and trillions of money in the game, but nobody knows on which of the different layers it will reside in the end.
And sorry, just jump in on a little bit of that. On the application layer, how do you decide when you build it yourself and when you use a vendor? Is it based on just the ROI or just the talent? I'd love to hear the thoughts a little bit.
Yeah, that's a super important question. You're totally on spot. I think this is absolutely crucial. As a recommendation for others, I mean, if you are a smaller company, please don't build too much yourself. This will definitely not work out. It's not about building the prototype, which even I, with my ancient knowledge from earlier years, can do in a couple of days. I do it regular for myself, trying this, trying that, building a little application for myself. You can do it in a few days. But if you don't have then afterwards the factory of bringing those things into a scalable rollout, into adoption and everything, you will just fail. You will just build up technical debt, which you will basically die of afterwards. Look for partners, get yourself help with doing so. It doesn't have to be the big tech ones, can also be smaller consultancies, whatever it is, but get yourself some help on doing so. You won't be able to do it. For us at our scale, we have big teams working on it. We have also colleagues that have been in this field for many years already, and all the machinery behind it, as I mentioned before. And for us, the decision is rather complex, and it's not the one or the other. We do both. So if it is a very standard task, a very standard thing, then you can expect that it will come from vendors, and it will also come from multiple vendors, not just from a single vendor, which also then brings you in a position that you're able to negotiate. If we would not be able to negotiate in the end, we'd come to the problem I mentioned before. They can charge us basically the value creation they bring us, and then we didn't win anything. Then we still have to do it ourselves, maybe. More importantly, really for us is, where's a niche that does not come from many vendors? Where's a niche that is specific to logistics? Where's maybe a corner of our business where a self-developed solution can bring us a competitive edge over our competitors, basically? Where's something that cannot be bought off the shelf, because if you can buy it off the shelf, also the other big ones will do it in the logistics area, of course. So very much we try to look at the logistics value chain, at specific processes that we are having. For example, customs clearance is a big area where we are spending insane amounts of effort on. And this is not something that Microsoft will build a product for. Also, maybe Amazon for themselves, but they will not share probably them. So this is a big area, for example, and everything else that is logistics related is definitely something to build yourself. For the other things, we always look at the market situation. And a third consideration maybe is then also training our muscle. Of course, we maybe could also now buy some of the stuff that we are building ourselves, but we also have to make sure that we stay up to date on what can be done, that we train our employees, our workforce on implementing these kinds of things, so that when then an opportunity comes across to gain a competitive edge, we are also able to do so.
I think it is fair to say that the more generic a use case is, the more standard software you have also available, or it is much easier to think about partnering or buying a service into the company, whereas if it's a very specialized use case, potentially having some kind of competitive edge, then obviously it is a good consideration to think about building it in-house. And I think another point to add to that is obviously whether or not entrepreneurs have access to these very hard problems that are very specific to a certain industry or very specific to a certain use case. For example, when I was working in the airline in the airline space, anything on the air side, so essentially after security, is actually quite hard to access as an entrepreneur. So that is one of the reasons also why then, for example, some of these airline companies need to innovate themselves. But I think coming to our second block, and I think you've mentioned sort of your past experience in coding, and obviously that's a field that also gets evolved so quickly. Now you have co-pilots. Now you can use ChatGPT in many, many different ways of coding. And I think the early conversations we also had in this podcast was around how the creative industries are getting disrupted. We talked about DALL-E, we talked about Midjourney, creating images that are beautiful within seconds. And then I think it expanded into creative writing. But now with more reasoning models, it actually seems like that perhaps even all types of jobs may be at risk here, or not necessarily at risk, but can be enhanced or evolve. And actually, there's a very interesting article by A16Z, and they actually have a list of posted a list of top 50 jobs that actually may be AI automated, which I thought was crazy because it really talked about various verticals from architects, construction managers, production planning, clerks, sales agents, financial investment analysts, assistants, dental, food services. Like we essentially talk about every vertical and every function that could potentially be disrupted or automated by AI, which I think is crazy. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I ask for some initial reactions here from the room.
Doesn't always have to be myself. I mean, if you guys also want to react to it, Rod, Max, fine, but I can also start.
I want actually to ask something around these lines, so Thorsten, in that recently there was this report by Anthropic. So they are the makers of Claude. So they were showing, based on the type of prompts that people are asking, they were trying to connect it to which industry is this related. So, and then let's say, like, less surprisingly, the most popular use case that people are using Anthropic Claude, it is for like coding and computer science related tasks mathematically. But what at least to me was very surprising was that this is not used that often for business related tasks, for example, financial planning and anything that is more like operations related, as well as creative industries such as script writing, so movie creation and so on. And I'm here wondering, and I would like to know your take. Would you say that this is more because this is still early days, so to say, that let's say those who are early adopters are the coders, and that's why the most common use cases are code related? Or is it because the models and the whole software is not that reliable and therefore doesn't make sense that use it, for example, for accounting, for financial planning, or to create a TV show?
Yeah, maybe starting with your question first. So I believe that the observations of Anthropic are biased. They are skewed, in my opinion, because Anthropic for me is not the first place to go to if you're not a tech-savvy person, and if you want to get into using AI for your tasks. This is maybe more for those who know a bit more, who maybe have chosen what to do based on the availabilities of ChatGPT, Gemini, Le Chat from Mistral, and also then Anthropic. And then Claude 3.5 Sonnet is especially known for being probably the best coding model. Maybe with the exclusion of O1 or O3 Mini, which recently came up, it is accepted to be the best coding model. And so it's not surprising that it's used quite a lot in that area. And as said before, it's maybe not the most well-known offering in that area. I think this skews their report a bit, but nevertheless, the insights were quite interesting for me as well. It's definitely good to see this, and it's in general also on a meta level good that we get the chance to get a peek into the actual usage of these kinds of systems. It would be nice to see the same from ChatGPT, because there I believe it would also be slightly different. Still, coding would be definitely a top thing, because the nice thing is that really it is clear input-output that you have there, that you have also kind of a way of assessing if it's correct or not, if a code is done, if it runs, it is at least likely to to have some correctness in it. For other things like creative writing, it's maybe much harder. There, it's more also subjective considerations on if it's good or not, and therefore it is definitely also a different thing to look at. I do also believe that the adoption, of course, is different. Tech-savvy people like developers definitely have more higher likelihood to be exposed to this also. So again, another skewness in this kind of data, in my opinion. Maybe coming back to you, Chris, I fully believe that any limitation of AI will vanish over the time. I do not know when, but I do believe that everything that a human can do in the near future, an AI will be able to do, period. The question is then, of course, how do we prepare for this? I have no idea. The best thing we can do is to very actively get engaged into it, very actively shape what happens. I'm also in favor of regulations to a certain degree. I do not say that the European approach is the best. There are definitely severe limitations, in my opinion, in terms of limiting innovation for smaller companies especially. But I do think that there is also a need for something like that. Also, when I talk with my children about it, they are now 12 and 15. It's hard to give a recommendation which job definitely will be easy. I think anything that massively relies on personal relationships, any kind of social job, probably is harder to replace. I'm not saying that it cannot be done, but it's harder definitely. And beyond that, being curious, staying open-minded, and just accepting that you will have to change again and again during your career. I think this is the key ingredient.
And Thorsten, I just want to say that, so going back to your point on, so AI will be everywhere, will be adopted by everyone and so on, but there are more and more studies coming on saying that we're sort of becoming illiterate through AI, meaning given that we just get the answer, we just copy paste it, we're no longer thinking through, we're no longer trying to understand what's going on. Do you have any thoughts around that? Do you think maybe we'll start doing things differently, or is there really a risk that so we'll be devolving, so to say, and becoming less and less smarter because we're not really thinking through?
Yeah, this is definitely a challenge I do see. It's a lot about awareness of this problem also, a lot about reflectiveness. You have to be sure that you come to a working mode that is fine. I mean, for some areas, we already have this. Who would ever double check the result of a calculator? I would never do it. If I type something in and the number comes out, it is what it is, right? So I think that for some areas, it's okay. If then we will be limited in the things that we will still be able to do as mankind, this would be a problem. But I don't think that this will apply to everybody. What I expect actually is a kind of bifurcation, I must say. So I think that a majority of people really will fully rely on this, that a lot of people will not reflect on the results that come out of it, that it's also maybe okay for some of the things that are happening, but there is a risk that we see a bigger spread. But there will be remaining a smaller minority of people who are very deep into the topic, who very actively think about it, and these will then maybe also make a difference. This brings us, of course, to massive challenges for our societies. We will have definitely problems coming from this kind of gap. Why would you pay somebody who just relies on AI a significant amount in terms of salary? It's not that big of a value creation that these people would be bringing. On the other hand side, if you are in the minority of people who go beyond what AI is able to do, who go beyond what the majority can do, you would power all your money off on them, right? This is definitely a big challenge. How do we avoid a further separation of the poor and the rich? Even beyond those billionaires. Let's not talk about them. They are beyond any normal scope. But also just in the workforce, I think we are going towards a situation where a very small fraction of the workforce will create the majority of the value creation. And this is a challenge, definitely. It is no coincidence that many of the people who look into AI also think about, what is it in English, the conditionless base salary or whatever you would call it, so that you just have a salary for everybody to a certain degree, because the value creation will be massively focused to a small minority for big parts of our economies.
Yes, I think you're thinking about universal basic income.
Yes.
That is that's the question that I guess we always ask about the potential of jobs being taken away, and therefore what are the social implications, right? For a very long time, the production is done by labor, and now labor is entirely taken away by AI. Well, I don't know if that's 100% true, but that's let's say that's the case, and then what will happen to our social fabric, that thing that holds us all together? Um, I think one thing, just to follow up on some of the things that you mentioned, which is around, I guess, the value creation side of things. How do you think about, let's say, for yourself when you're hiring folks, how do you think about that, right? How do you think about building up your team? Your value creation will come from X amount of folks, and then do you train up the rest of your team, or do you double down on folks that are really building up value? I guess this will play into some of the things that we'll talk about.
Where to start? So I think that our team definitely is not a standard sample, a random sample from the typical workforce. We, of course, have very highly skilled, highly niche expertise in our team, all around data, all around AI. So this is definitely very special folks that we're looking at. Maybe within this domain, what we are always looking for is more the proper mindset. I mean, there's also this common saying, you don't hire for skills, you hire for attitude. I think this is more true than ever these days because things are moving so fast. So everything I know from the old days of data science is maybe not irrelevant now, but definitely there are many other things that are more important for my colleagues working on these topics now. So if you don't have the mindset of continuous learning, if you don't have the mindset of also quickly trying out things and get your hands dirty on your stuff, then you will quickly fall behind. And so this is super important here. But this is, of course, very special for this domain where we are working in. For other areas, not sure if I'm the best to judge on this, but I think in general, open-mindedness, willingness to learn, willingness to change is something that is super critical. And also how call it? Not be overly confident on your past achievements, not be overly confident of your experience that you
Being
have.
humble.
Yeah, being humble is definitely super important. Yes.
And DHL and in general, large organizations have a long tradition of having data teams and so on. So there's already structures where you can build on top in order to have these new AI techniques, models, processes, and so on. But what about those that are just starting their journey? Especially, let us say, large organizations where you cannot really drive from a coolness factor in order to attract maybe like ambitious, so early career starters. So how can they go about? I don't know if you have here some suggestions in terms of which profiles might make sense to first bring in. So which type of maybe projects or first starters they can have in order to introduce these new AI mindset, new AI processes in the company.
I mean, you can also look at some of the job postings that are out there now. Sometimes there is, for example, explicitly said, you should not use Google search. This is why I've seen this in job postings recently. And you should not start writing in Word or whatever, never ever, right? And I mean, I can reflect on this for myself. Any text that is longer than 2 sentences, I don't start in the program where I want to have it in the end. So I think this is definitely more about the mindset of cooperation with an AI, the mindset of using it wherever possible. But I think recommendations for companies that are getting started, if it's about talent, if it's about the workforce, I think this open-mindedness, this willingness to learn, this willingness to adopt these kind of things, but also clarity of mind to critically reflect that not every hype is something that you have to follow up on. I think this is, from the workforce perspective, the most important thing you should be looking at. I'm not sure if you also meant this, if you also think about IT infrastructure and everything. I think that everything that keeps you flexible has to be in favor. If you have to make big investments into infrastructure, big investments into a certain cloud, for example, a lot of effort in setting up a solution that is then limited to one of the big cloud providers, you should not do that, in my opinion. You have to be flexible. You have to look at what kind of abstraction layers you can look at that makes it possible for you to switch afterwards. There is, for example, for many things you can build on top of Kubernetes. You can have a Kubernetes in every cloud environment. If you have such kind of an approach and do not fully buy into, I don't know, the specifics of AWS, the specifics of Azure, it keeps you flexible that you can also switch somewhere else afterwards. Because if not, you are head over heels into this one vendor. And if they increase their prices, you're lost and have no alternatives. I think flexible setup, dynamic setup, this implies, of course, also full CI/CD, so that from your code, you can reproduce your full system in a matter of hours. I think this is absolutely crucial. Of course, it's a bit idealistic what I'm describing here. I know that there are limitations to it, but at least starting off with this mindset and very reflectedly making trade-offs to it, I think this is a generic recommendation I would give.
And what I'm hearing, and just to wrap up that second block, is that maybe people shouldn't be tied to a role specific, because we need to keep in mind that roles change over time. And I don't think this whole 30 years in the same job, in the same activity, in the same routine will actually apply going forward. Or it might apply to a small number of jobs, but the most of them will be enhanced or even automated by AI. And I think, Thorsten, your point is so valid, that we need to adopt a mindset of humbleness, of nimbleness, and just staying open-minded and embracing new adoptions, technologies, or what comes our way. So great. Moving to the third one, and I'm very, very excited to learn more about your experience, Thorsten, when it comes to AI. And tell us a little bit more, what are the use cases you have with AI? How do you use it on a day-to-day basis?
Before I describe this, maybe a quick remark also to other managers who might be listening here. I strongly believe that you have to live and lead by example in that area. I have seen many managers asking for, hey team, why don't you use more AI? But then if you ask more in details, you notice that they barely ever open ChatGPT or whatever tool they are using and have a limited understanding of it themselves. So I always try also to keep up a bit of street credibility with my folks, because they will notice otherwise, definitely. I really use AI in the majority of things that I'm doing. I also have honestly too many subscriptions with all those different vendors at the moment, also just to see what is possible. I mean, it's super nice to compare the voice modes of ChatGPT and Gemini, for example, because this is just also keeps me up to date and see where it's going, and maybe the one is ahead and the other one is ahead. So this is super interesting. So starting off maybe with my most important way of using it at the moment, it is really helping me sort my mind and coming from abstract thoughts to an actionable plan. What I mean by this, I mean, this is specific maybe also for the role that I'm having, specific for any managerial role. Very often you have some abstract thought. Oh, why don't we apply AI in this or that area? Or how could we set up a training curriculum for this or for that? Or how could we convince, I don't know, whom, whatever, on a certain thing? And then I start off ideally in voice mode, if not at least with voice transcription. Forget about typing it down, but you have to let your thoughts flow. This is such an amazing feature. You can talk for 5 minutes, dump your random thoughts into these systems, and then say, make a plan. Help me structure it, summarize my thoughts, link it maybe to some external knowledge that is there, and then afterwards give me an outline for a PowerPoint presentation. I mean, I don't care if it builds it for me. This is also nice if it would be able to do that. But if I just have the order, the structured thought out of my blurriness of whatever is happening in my head sometimes, this is such a game changer for me. This is really has completely changed the way I tackle things. Do not have to procrastinate these kinds of things. Very often you say, I don't have time in my daily work to really step back and start off with new fresh concepts, with a new idea, because you would need a day for it or something. This I can do in 10 minutes. I put it down, voice into it, add some additional thoughts, then maybe by typing, then maybe ask a bit for a change in how it is structured. But really after a few minutes, maybe half an hour, I can then also give it to one of my teammates to further work on it. And this is such a game changer for me. That's absolutely. Beyond that, I mean, as I said before, no longer text I ever start off from scratch. I absolutely avoid a white sheet of paper. I mean, no, physically papers I use sometimes, but a white screen of, I don't know, PowerPoint, white screen of Word, whatever, I would never do that. And the third area really is for me this experimentation. I try to keep up with the developments. I build a little AI app here, a little module there, just in order to also see what it means under the hood. I don't want to be the one telling my people, why does it take so long implementing blah, 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 when I have no idea what it actually means, what the actual peculiarities are if you get into a RAG approach, retrieval augmented generation, for example. This feels wrong to me. I mean, I'm happy that I'm able to do so because I have this background, but also really staying on top of the possibilities that are there. I mean, now recently this whole hype around agents, building an agent yourself is not that hard. If you're able to write Python and use an AI, it can really be done quite quickly. So these kinds of things are my most important use cases. But summarizing, basically, there's hardly anything I do without AI these days.
And what I'm taking away from that is like voice seems to be your way of communication, not text. And we can't actually verify whether or not you're in the room with us today, Thorsten, or whether you pilot or whatnot. I mean, we were joking that at one point in 5 years or 3 years, we're just going to have this podcast recorded with our digital twin. I don't know, maybe to the other two, do you have any questions for Thorsten on personal experience with AI?
I was wondering, Thorsten, so you're mentioning that it's important for a manager to, let's say, be close to the metal, be able to first try things by themselves and so on. But how do you balance that? As a manager, one also needs to manage the team. Also, a lot of like stakeholder management, a lot of like meetings, communication, and so on. And at least personally, I find that, for example, if I have a day of meetings, I really struggle going back into like a focus mode and start coding. How do you balance all that?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. In my day-to-day work, I hardly have time for doing so. So definitely, if it wasn't my passion, I would probably not have the time, especially doing this coding part. I guess revenge bedtime procrastination is a keyword here. So you might find me somewhere in the night trying out these kinds of things. And this only is possible because, I mean, it's really my passion. I also still have a family at home. I have a wife, I have children, as I told you before. So the first part of my day is work, second part of my day is family. And then, of course, not every day, but whenever I still have the stamina and the concentration to do so, I try to dive deeper into these things because it's really a passion. And also this linking back to the workforce questions we had before, I think passion is so important. You see the overperformers, they always have a lot of passion for what they are doing.
And I have one last question. I know, Thorsten, you mentioned about your family, and you also mentioned that you have two very young kids, or relatively young kids. I wonder, how are they using AI? And the reason why I asked this question is because I remember Gary Vee or someone, when he was trying to figure out what's the next best social thing to invest in, like the Snapchats, for example. He basically went around and sit at school and just watch some of the 16-year-old kids and how they're using stuff. So I just wonder, from your perspective, how are your kids using AI?
I would assume more reflected than other kids of the same age, because of course I am telling them a lot about it. I'm also trying actively to bring them closer to it, but also step back and think what to do and what not to do. So yes, they are of course also using it for their schoolwork, for their homework to a certain extent. I also told them to not have the homework done by AI. This is definitely, that wouldn't make sense, but use it as a buddy, use it as an orientation. If you want to learn something new, get yourself an orientation from ChatGPT and afterwards dive deeper into a topic. I mean, this is the best way of approaching a new domain at the moment. So they are definitely using it and they are also benefiting a lot from it. But I try to make sure that they are to a certain degree reflected on how to use it and when not to use it.
And Thorsten, I feel like we can spend another 2 hours listening to your thoughts on this. But given that we're running out of time, do you have any final thoughts on AI, Gen AI, that you would like to share with us?
Maybe 3 things. The first thing is for me, For a long time, there has been this AI is becoming super powerful somewhere on the horizon. And for many decades now, we have always been saying, yes, it's on the horizon, but it may take for however long. I think this has changed. My perception is that we're moving very fast, that we are really close to coming to a stage where it is insanely powerful. And if you would give O3 to somebody from 3 years ago, they will say, oh, this is AGI. So it is really happening right now for me. The second thing really is, don't get fooled if it fails in some areas. The capabilities are not equally distributed. It will fail in things where you say, oh, I can do it when you wake me up at 3 a.m. in the morning. But it will also succeed in areas where a PhD on the same domain probably will fail. So this is massively skewed at the moment. Don't get fooled by that. It is moving forward, and anything that doesn't work now might work in the near future. And in terms of development, nobody knows where it's going. Nobody knows on which level of value creation the most money will reside. Nobody knows what will be possible in the near future. So we have to prepare for a future where we have to react swiftly, where we have to stay adaptive, both on a personal level, but also on an organizational level. And so nothing is, no, how did Niels Bohr say? Predictions are hard, especially if they are about the future. I think this is more true than ever. So nobody knows where it's going. So we have to stay adaptive.
And I tremendously enjoyed this conversation with you, Thorsten. What I'm taking away from this in one sentence is to lean in rather than to ignore, and staying nimble. And with that, thank you so much for all your thoughts and all the commentary that you shared today with us. If anyone of our audience would like to reach out to you, what would be the best way to do so?
I think the easiest is over LinkedIn or some other platforms. You can find me on the typical channels. So yeah, happy to get in contact.
Great. Thank you so much. So with that, thank you to everyone. If you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the chrisrodmax.com newsletter, channels, wherever you find us. Thank you so much, and see you.